Swiss watches often show their age right on the dial, the face of the watch. Patina, fading, spotting, sometimes even real damage.
And this is where opinions split. Should you restore the dial and bring it back to a like-new look, or leave it untouched as a piece of history?
Some collectors say patina is the soul of the vintage watch. Others believe careful restoration can save a watch from being forgotten.
Today we're diving into one of the biggest debates in vintage horology: restore or preserve.
We'll look at the pros and cons of the dial restoration versus original patina, how each choice affects historical integrity, market value, and aesthetics.
And we'll talk about when restoration might actually make sense and when touching the dial is the worst thing you can do.
For many collectors and horology enthusiasts, an untouched dial is the soul of the vintage watch. Decades of patina, subtle discoloration, tropical browning on black dials, radium burnt markers, creamy lume, these aren't flaws. They are fingerprints of the time.
These imperfections tell the story of the watch's journey. They prove its age and turn the watch into a genuine artifact of its era. Collectors often say an original dial doesn't just show wear, it represents the watch's life.
And that's where historical integrity comes in. An original dial directly links the watch to its past. Once it's repainted or heavily altered, that connection is gone, and it can be brought back.
That's why collectors cherish original dials so much. Authenticity matters. In most cases, a vintage watch with an unrestored dial, even with visible aging, is worth significantly more than the same watch with a refinished one.
Auction results make this very clear. An all-original Rolex reference 6062 once sold for 4 times the price of the similar example that had its dial relumed. Same watch, same reference, completely different outcome.
Which means you can spend a lot of money restoring a dial just to make the watch worth less.
Original dials and hands are where the money is in the vintage watches. Collectors demand age-appropriate, untouched surfaces because they see patina as part of the watch's provenance.
This becomes even more important with historically significant watches. Military-issued pieces, early explorer watches. For these, preserving the original dial is often seen as non-negotiable.
An untouched military dial directly connects the watch to the era and events it lived through. Refinishing it doesn't just change the look. Many collectors see it as erasing history.
As the saying goes, the dial is the watch's face. And for purists, that face should honestly reflect its age, not pretend it was born yesterday.
There is also a strong emotional and aesthetic appeal. No two patinas are the same. One vintage Omega might fade into a warm champagne tone, while a Rolex tropical dial can turn deep chocolate brown.
Collectors often call this honest patina. A bit of wear adds warmth and personality. Some people actually prefer that over a perfectly clean, sterile-looking dial.
Certain aging effects can have cult followings. Tropical dial, spider crack lacquer, these are quirks only time can produce, and they can be convincingly faked.
In recent years, the market has fully embraced this. What was once considered damage is now often celebrated and even marketed as a feature.
In 1960s, a Rolex Submariner with an even tropical brown dial has sold for over $40,000, while a similar example with a clean black dial may sell for half of that. That's a massive premium, just for the patina.
Collectors today are literally chasing imperfections. The market now rewards authenticity over restoration, and untouched watches often outperform restored ones.
But not all patina is equal. Even hardcore collectors draw a line between attractive aging and a real damage.
Even golden brown aging is admired. Heavily mold, corrosion or ugly water stains usually aren't, although some people will call almost anything cool patina if it looks symmetrical enough.
A practical rule many horologists follow is this: If the aging comes from the original material itself, it's history. If it's foreign material like the dirt, mold or corrosion, removing it isn't erasing history, it's just cleaning.
And that distinction helps owners decide whether to intervene or not. Original material that has aged naturally is patina to preserve. Foreign damage might be something you carefully address.
One of the biggest questions collectors ask is simple: how does restoration affect value?
And at the top level of collecting, the answer is very clear. Originality usually wins. Untouched dials command a premium, while refinished dials are often heavily discounted or rejected entirely.
Serious collectors and top auction houses are famously strict about this. In many auction catalogs, dial original is treated almost like a quality stamp, and the word redial is basically a warning label.
And even small interventions matter. In one well-known case, a Rolex with only a relume dial was worth about 1/4 of a fully original example.
So yes, sometimes just fixing the lume can quietly erase 75% of the value.
This is why auctioneers often repeat the same rule: all original watches always fetch more than restored ones.
But here's where the things get interesting. This logic doesn't apply equally across the entire market.
In the broader vintage market, especially for more common watches, restoration can actually help value. A heavily stained or ugly dial on a common 1940s dress watch might make it nearly unsellable.
But restore the dial properly and suddenly the watch becomes attractive, wearable and much easier to sell, often for more money than before.
Many buyers outside the hardcore collector world see restored dials as an enhancement. They want vintage style, not museum-level originality.
That's why you often see refinished dials on mid-century Omega and Longines models. These watches are plentiful, and a clean dial helps them sell faster to casual buyers.
Context matters. If you are talking about a grey-level watch like a Paul Newman Daytona, any non-original dial or heavenly polishing is a huge mistake.
But if it's a 1965 Omega Seamaster, refinishing the dial isn't going to destroy some mythical investment value. It may actually make the watch more enjoyable for the next owner.
This has created a split market. At the top, elite collectors chase untouched examples and pay big premiums. At the retail level, there is strong demand for beautifully restored vintage watches.
Neither side is wrong. They are just buying different things.
The key question for any owner is simple: what category does your watch belong to? Is it historically important and rare, or is it a wearable vintage piece meant to be enjoyed?
And finally, there is one rule that applies to everyone: transparency.
A restored dial isn't automatically bad, but pretending it's original is. Undisclosed redials destroy trust, reputation, and value.
That's why reputable dealers clearly state when a dial has been professionally finished and price the watch accordingly.
When everything is disclosed, the market works properly. Original watches get their full premium, restored watches find the right buyers, and everyone knows what they're buying.
Whether dial restoration is accepted or not often depends on one big thing: the brand.
Because not all vintage watches live in the same collector universe. Some communities are extremely forgiving, others not so much.
Let's start at the top. Rolex and Patek Philippe are where originality is almost sacred.
In vintage Rolex sport models, Submarinas, Daytonas, GMTs, even tiny dial changes can dramatically affect value. A redialed Rolex is usually valued much lower, no matter how good it looks.
Ironically, rare imperfections on Rolex dials can actually add value. Tropical fading, small misprints, collectors love them because they're original and impossible to recreate.
Once you repaint or replace the dial, all of that disappears.
And with Patek Philippe, it's the same story. A slightly aged original dial from the 1940s is far more desirable than a clean, refinished one.
The same logic applies to military and tool watches. These watches derive value from their history, not perfection.
A World War II era Longines or Vietnam era Tudor submariner issued to the military carries its story on the dial. Patina, fading, even damage can be part of that story.
Take the British military Omega Seamaster 300 from the 1960s. Many have degraded lume or dial aging, and collectors actually expect it.
Replacing the dial or illuminate might take the watch look nicer, but it also strips away its service history. In this category, battle scars are often respected.
So, for historically significant tool watches, restoration is generally frowned upon. Original condition validates the watch story.
Now let's move into a more flexible area. Brands like Omega, Longines and Heuer.
Here things loosen up. Yes, many collectors still prefer original dials, but the market is much more forgiving, especially for common references.
Vintage Omega Seamasters or Constellations are frequently seen with restored dials. These watches aren't extremely rare, and many buyers simply want a clean, attractive vintage watch.
As long as the restoration is done well and disclosed, many buyers are fine with it, especially if the price reflects it.
Even Omega's official restoration service will offer to replace or restore dials on a vintage watches. Hardcore collectors usually say no. Casual owners often say yes.
Because for a watch that isn't a grail or a museum piece, restoration won't cause an outcry. It might actually make the watch more enjoyable.
In simple terms, the lower the watch sits on the collector hierarchy, the more acceptable restoration becomes.
There is also a special category worth mentioning: enamel dial watches.
Enamel dials, often found on the older Swiss watches and pocket watches, can develop airline cracks or chips. Restoring them is extremely difficult and expensive.
Many collectors actually prefer original enamel dials with small cracks because the printing and character remain untouched.
If an enamel dial is badly damaged, a reproduction might be made, but that usually lowers collectible value significantly, even if the watch looks better.
This applies to watches from brands like Vacheron Constantin, as well as vintage Omega pocket watches. In this niche, originality again wins.
So what's the takeaway? The rarer and more historically important the watch, the more the community values an untouched dial.
And the more common and wear-oriented the watch, the more acceptable restoration becomes, especially if the goal is enjoyment rather than investment.
Not every vintage dial deserves the same treatment. The right approach depends on what kind of aging or damage you're actually dealing with.
This is where experience matters, because patina, dirt and damage are three very different things, even if they look similar at first glance.
Let's start with the easiest case, a lightly aged dial with even patina. Gentle discoloration, evenly aged lume, maybe a soft haze. This is the kind of aging collectors love.
In most cases, the best advice here is simple: don't touch it. This type of patina adds charm and value. It's part of the watch's character.
During servicing, you might clean the crystal or replace gaskets to protect the dial, but the dial itself should usually be left alone.
Think of 1950s dress watch with an evenly faded jewel dial. Trying to fix the color would almost certainly do more harm than good.
The rule here is conservation over restoration. Do the minimum necessary to preserve the dial, store the watch properly, and enjoy its originality.
Now, a different situation, when the dial itself is original and healthy, but it's covered in foreign substances: dirt, oil, mold spots, or moisture stains.
This is where careful, targeted cleaning can make sense. The key is separating real patina from foreign grime.
If a skilled watchmaker determines that surface residue can be removed without damaging the original paint, many collectors agree it's reasonable to clean it.
In that case, you're not erasing history, you're revealing it.
But this is delicate work. Vintage dials are fragile, and the wrong solvent or pressure can strip paint instantly. If the risk is too high, many collectors prefer to live with the stain rather than gamble.
Next level, moderate, localized damage. 1 or 2 problem areas, a small flake of paint, a localized stain, slightly corroded markers.
Here, partial intervention can be considered. Not a full refinish, but a stabilization.
Some high-end restorers can do real microsurgery. Filling a tiny missing letter, blending a small color spot, or sealing a flaking area with a clean lacquer to stop further damage.
One common example is lume. If a lume plot has a small hole, a restorer might inject a matching vintage-colored compound to fill it and seal it.
If done well, it's nearly invisible.
Purists might still say do nothing, but many collectors see careful stabilization as a reasonable compromise, especially if it prevents further decay.
Now we get to the hard cases, severe or widespread damage.
Large areas of peel and paint, heavenly fungus, destroyed varnish, situations where the dial is honestly hard to live with.
If the watch is historically important or very valuable, collectors often still prefer leave the dial as is, or try to source a correct original replacement dial.
But if that's not possible, or if the watch is more sentimental than investment grade, a full restoration can be justified.
A full refinish means stripping and completely repainting and reprinting the dial. Skilled artisans can recreate vintage layouts incredibly well.
The result can look stunning, but it's no longer original, and that trade-off has to be accepted consciously.
And sometimes value isn't the main point. If it's a family heirloom meant to be worn and enjoyed, restoring the dial might matter more than collector purity.
So the takeaway is simple: match the intervention to the condition.
Fix active problems, stop decay, and don't over-restore and remove the very things that make a vintage dial special.
And when in doubt, a good watchmaker or restoration specialist can help you decide how far is too far.
So, restoring or preserving a vintage dial comes down to philosophy. Purists value untouched dials as a direct link to the history, where every mark and fade adds character and authenticity.
Others see careful restoration as a way to give a watch new life, making it wearable and enjoyable again without disrespecting its design.
There is no single right answer. It depends on the watch, its rarity, its condition, and what it means to you.
If you restore, do it properly and be transparent. If you preserve, protect the watch and stop further damage.
Whether untouched or restored, every vintage watch tells a story, and in the end, the value and the beauty is in the eye of the beholder.